All right, thank you everyone for joining the City of Kingston's Complete Streets Advisory Council. Today is December 8th, 2021. My name is Greg Krupp, the liaison for the Complete Streets Advisory Council and the organizer for these virtual events. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to go over a few meeting guidelines to help us navigate. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. We will have a public comment period. Committee members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you're not speaking to avoid any background noise. If a committee member or staff wishes to speak, they should raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for everyone. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website at a later date. Although we will have public comments tonight, but you can also submit your written comments to me at gkrupp@kingston-ny.gov. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs. If you have any audio issues, send me a text message at the following number, 845-418-9634. I will repeat this number, but be aware that phone calls will not be answered. Just text 845-418-9634. As organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Thank you for your patience. And on behalf of the Complete Streets Advisory Council, I wish you good health. And I now turn the floor over to Chair Bob Dennison.
Well done, Greg. You're getting good at that. I think that's going to be, soon it'll be memorized. It'll be great. What I'd like to do to start off is to go around because there are people here that are new, which is great, and introduce each other or ourselves. Self-introductions, I think, is the way to go. I'll start off. I'm Bob Dennison. I'm the chair of the Complete Streets Advisory Council. By way of background, for those that don't, I'm a retired civil engineer, and I don't know, what else do I need to say? Well, a lot of stuff will come out later. Claudette, how about you can go next?
Hi, I'm Claudette Ford. I am currently the chair of the RCAL, Resource Center for Accessible Living, until December. As of January, I will be off the board. I have been in public works for over 30 years, and I have been the director in the cities of New Haven, Connecticut, Oakland, California, and Berkeley, California.
Great. David, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm David Stoss. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Ulster County Transportation Council. I work closely with Brian. We have a staff of 2.5. Brian's unable to make it for the start of this meeting, but he asked that I participate. And yeah, Kingston resident, all that good stuff. Been with the county for 8 years, 9 years, somewhere in that range. So it's been a little while.
Is it old timer? Yeah. John, how about you?
John Gross Poland, part of this committee for a long time, and heavily involved with the rail trail committees, Chilcam Rail Trail, ONW, UND corridor there, and Walkill Valley Rail Trail. Veteran long distance bicycle tours.
Okay. Well, should I start? Well, I'll start with new people. Helen Atkinson, welcome.
Thank you. Hi. I'm here on behalf of the Conservation Advisory Council, and I just joined them a couple of months ago. I'm a resident of Kingston since 2013, and I'm very interested in the streets here. And so I'm delighted to be participating. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Great, welcome. Emily Flynn.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston. That primarily means that I coordinate a health commission called Live Well Kingston, but I'm also here to talk about the Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan, the Traffic Safety Campaign, and on a little bit of a personal note, I have an additional staff person in my department now, and this is her third day. So I am no longer a department of one, And now I have a department of 2. And I can pass to Greg.
It's an empire. EJ, I'm going to say this wrong. Michelle, is that correct? How do I?
Yes, you got it correct. Good.
All right.
I am a resident on Franklin Street, and I'm representing a group of property owners on the street who are very interested in the project, and Greg and I have had conversations. So I'm just here to observe the meetings and, hear what y'all are doing.
Okay, well, welcome as well.
Nice.
The first item on our agenda is public comment. And if anybody has a public comment, indicate it or would like to make one, let me know, and we'll jump right in. I guess EJ would be the only one, or Helen. We know the rest of these people. Okay, so absent no comment, we'll move on. If you rethink that, we'll do public comments at the end as well. We can add that on just in case something comes up that people would like to talk about. So the next item agenda would be the review of the minutes of our last meeting. I assume everybody's read them. I know Greg does a great job with minutes. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes, and then we'll discuss them. Motion is made by John Gross, and a second. Claudette. Do we have any discussion, corrections, or revisions that people would like to make to the minutes?
I think they look good.
I do too. Okay, absent any corrections or comments, I'll entertain a motion to, we should have a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the last meeting?
Aye.
Raise your hands, aye. Anybody, any opposed? Any abstainers? Okay, the minutes are accepted. Thank you very much, Greg. You did a great job as usual. Old business. Well, this is interesting. We sent a note to the mayor about e-scooter and e-bike legislation after our last meeting. And if you remember in that note, we suggested that they entertain a local ordinance to regulate shared e-bike systems. That we did not want to take a position on prohibiting e-bikes or e-scooters because we didn't think that was practical and we didn't think it made a lot of sense. But we did think that a resolution about a shared system would be prudent. I've not heard anything back from the mayor from that note. I don't know if Greg has or not. He's, it's a tough time of year. There's a lot on his plate. There's new council people coming in, so I'm sure he's I doubt that it would be introduced at the end of the year here before we're about to seat 3 new council people. Is that correct, or 4? 3 at least, right? 4, yeah. So I would expect that he wouldn't introduce the legislation that would. So
It's
it might
actually
be an early thing next year. 5. Okay, is that what EJ said? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 of them were said goodbye last night at the Common Council. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming 5 more are going to be replaced.
Yeah. So with that kind of a change, I wouldn't expect him to introduce legislation like this week, this month. But we will encourage him after the new ones are seated. And we probably should spend some time, maybe we'll send a note to the new council people to kind of orient them once we get the mayor's blessing to do that. There was a company that was interested in doing a shared system in Kingston. I remember Bird, I think is the name of the company. I don't know if they've gone away or if they're still around.
They email me every once in a while.
Okay.
I either don't respond or say, we're still working on it.
Right. Well, that's the right answer both times. So once that moves forward, we'll move forward. Art, in summary for the new people, the people who are new to the meeting, we recommended a shared system with some geofencing on some areas, and we recommended a docked system be considered, not one of those random ones where there's bikes all over the world or scooters all over the world. And Bird had proposed one, so we'll see what goes from there. there would be a lot of work to get the legislation in shape to get it. If he wants to move forward on it, I expect we'd be engaged in that.
Yeah,
Second,
something also to note is that we have a new corporation counsel. And the two attorneys that will be working with the new corporation counsel haven't even started yet. So let alone the 5 council members who have to be briefed on it, we have to go through it with them as well in the corporation counsel's office. So that might cause a delay in terms of crafting that legislation.
Yeah. And next year would be a good year to do it because it's an off year, I think, for the mayor. Mayor doesn't run for 2, right? 2 more years. And we wouldn't want to, you're not going to get it, the last year of a mayor's term is not going to be one where you're going to talk about things like this either, probably. Certainly not the next item, which we can, so that's good to know about a new corporation council. So everybody's new, that's good. They don't have any preconceptions, so gives us an opportunity. We should look at that. Sidewalk Improvement District. We've been kicking around the Sidewalk Improvement District for a number of years. And basically it is a proposal to create a district that will fund sidewalk maintenance and repairs throughout the city. And our goal is to get ourselves into conformity with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the requirements for sidewalks that are passable. And so that proposal is floating around. We've written to the mayor. Again, I would not expect any, welcome, Andy. I would not expect that anything to happen on that with 5 new council persons and new corporation council starting. So we've sent it to him. He's got it. I expect that when we have an opportunity next year to present it to the new council members, we should do so and see if we can get them on board to do a sidewalk improvement district and a maintenance plan and all, which actually goes to something that Emily's going to talk about, which is actually the first step in that activity, which is ongoing despite the political turmoil and uproar. We are marching on with the first piece of that, and that is, and that's what Emily is going to talk about when we get to the 4th or the 5th, when we get to D on our agenda. Any comments on that?
I would just say there's a little bit more urgency on this than I think the scooter thing, because there's more steps to go through to get to referendum. And if we don't put a push on it for this year, then it's going to end up being in an election year, which is, I know, undesirable because it's going to be a controversial item. So that being said, I think this one needs a little bit more of a push, or it might not happen for like 2 years
or more. So what if everybody is of like mind, what I'll do is I'll write a note to the mayor after this meeting suggesting that this be an early thing to talk about with our new council members and our new corporation council, and see if I can give them a little nudge.
I agree.
Could I make a comment? I'm sorry, I know I'm new, but
Sure.
My husband and I have quite a lot of visitors here, and they all voluntarily make a comment on the state of the sidewalks. And I'm in the middle of Midtown, and I'm constantly, there's a lot of people in Uptown who have strollers now. A lot of younger people with children have moved in particularly during the pandemic, and they're mostly pushing strollers with babies down the middle of the road. And to me, it seems like a very urgent issue, really out of hand.
Yeah, we agree, and we've been working on it for a couple of years to try to get it squared away. Now, that was one of Claudette's adventures in our Cal, where there are a number of people who have in the city who have mobility issues. Bad sidewalks are not, are difficult for people to negotiate. We've done a lot of work. We've talked about liability. We've looked at how much money they've paid out to claims for people who've fallen on sidewalks. I mean, there's lots of reasons that we should do this. What we need is political will. Go ahead, Claudette.
It's not that we don't want to do it. It is the political will, and 2, it's also figuring out a way to pay for it, because that is going to be the pushback. So,
right. Right. So more to come. We won't forget that. That I would suggest that as being our highest priority for next year, is to move that forward. Traffic, do you want to switch these two items as long as we're talking about sidewalks, Emily? And I was going to dump it in your lap to talk about pedestrians first, and then you could talk about traffic safety, because we like both of those things.
Sure.
You're on.
Want me to take it away? Okay.
Please.
So the pedestrian and bicycle master plan is a planning document for walkers and cyclists in the city of Kingston. The project is kind of in full swing now. We have hired a consultant and we're in the public outreach phase. And I have sort of an exciting, we're at an exciting stage in the chat. I'm putting a link to the pedestrian and bicycle master plan on Engage Kingston. If you scroll down, there is a link there under We Need Your Input, because there's a link to a web page. I'm trying to show you the flyer about it. There is now, they're calling it an app, but it's a web page where people can drop pins and give us the feedback about their walking and biking experience. So when I was tabling at the Snowflake, all I had to do was mention, tell me your least favorite sidewalk, and people reacted. So you can drop the kind of questions that we're looking for is destinations. So they want to try to know where people are coming and going. They want to know about cycling and walking concerns. And then finally, connections to public transportation. So there's sort of 4 categories of input that we're looking for. On the Engage Kingston, there's a little bit of an explanation of how to go through it. So I'm not going to kind of walk people through it right now, but I'll also say if anyone has any questions about how to input this information, they can reach out to me. Unfortunately, this website is not available in Spanish, but Maribel in the clerk's office is a Spanish speaker and can interpret for anyone. So if anyone who is Spanish speaking who would like to contribute information through this app, they can call City Hall and Maribel will interpret it for them, or they can come into City Hall and do it in person, and I have some printed flyers version of it. I'm pretty excited about this. This will collect a lot of information about people's experiences and the actual, what do you say, like the way that the sidewalks and roads are right now. So we're sort of getting a snapshot of what it looks like. That information will be collected by our consultants, and they will eventually be giving us recommendations that will go into our pedestrian and bicycle master plan. So we're kind of at this public outreach phase of the plan, and this is one element of that public outreach. Yeah, Greg.
Emily, you're talking about the instructions on Engage Kingston? I know Engage Kingston has a select language button at the top of it.
Yeah.
If it works for what you're talking about.
No. So thank you for that. On Engage Kingston, for any other language, there is up in the top right, the select language, and it's many, many languages. So that's really wonderful that our Engage Kingston website is able to be translated. But when you click into this pedestrian and bicycle master plan, we're calling it a crowdsourcing app, that's not able to be translated. Gotcha. So that's why we have Maribel as our interpreter for it.
Let me back up for a second too, just to give a little more background for people who are new to this. The Ulster County Transportation Council, Brian and David, have done an inventory, and they've provided as a first step in this plan an inventory of the sidewalks in Kingston, and that's been ongoing over the last couple of years. So that's an initial step. So we know how much sidewalk we have, and we have a relative, subjective rating of the sidewalks in the city and which sidewalks need what, or generally. So this is the next step. And another part of the plan that Emily's gang is working on is going to be what's called an Americans with Disabilities Transition Plan, which is a requirement of the federal government, and it's a good one, which prioritizes sidewalks and access based on the Americans with Disabilities Act. So in essence, it sets a priority list for sidewalk improvements to bring them into conformity with the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And some of the screens are like, busiest pedestrians and where they go. So the material that Emily's gathering with this crowdsourcing will help with determining which are the critical routes that have to be done first to get us into conformity with the Americans with Disabilities Act so that people can actually use the sidewalks and you don't see strollers and wheelchairs in the street or people in the street. That's interesting you observe that. That's always been that's a basic measure of the quality of a sidewalk in a municipality is how many people are walking in the street. And there's too many in Kingston walking in the street. I did see a note that EJ, is EJ the correct way to refer to you? Had a comment, wanted to say something about
Yeah, no,
sidewalk?
my name is actually Elizabeth. I just use EJ.
Elizabeth, okay, that's okay.
In a situation where there's, people that you don't know.
Right, no
Obviously, I
problem.
trust y'all. Yeah, if you don't mind, I actually read through all of the meeting minutes that are available online, and I couldn't find any explanation except Kristen's report at the last meeting that she had. She kind of talked about the sidewalk improvement district just a teensy bit. I did look at the Ithaca thing. It was referenced in one of the minutes that I read, the Ithaca plan. So I do have questions, but I don't know if this is the right time or place, and maybe I can talk to someone offline a little bit more about what your plans are, but I couldn't find anywhere any kind of ideas that are going to be incorporated that you're thinking about.
Well, I can give you some background and I can talk to you offline later if you'd like.
Okay.
The reason we didn't get into specifics in the conversations with the mayor is that there are some things that need to be decided by the city and the mayor. There's a number of alternatives. It could be a citywide district. It could be district by council district. It could, there's a number of different models. And Ithaca is the citywide district model, which is fine, but there may be other models that would be better suited to Kingston. And we needed the lawyer, corporation council's input, as well as the mayor's input, as well as the common council input. So we were not definitive with what we wanted to do. We keep talking about options. And once we get blessed to go forward, then we can move into, and before we develop the options completely, there needs to be a public participation element of that, which we have not.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thanks. One of the questions I was gonna have is how far along is it in the whole plan proposal? So you've answered that. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking my question.
No problem. Emily, traffic safety campaign. Where are we safe now?
I shouldn't laugh. So for anyone who's not familiar, the traffic safety education campaign has come up sort of by the Broadway streetscape redesign. There was a real identification of a need to educate all users on the streetscapes of how to use this new traffic formation. I believe the mayor went to the Common Council with a request I don't know the timeline, but the middle of last year, the Common Council denied that request. We had a few more bicycle deaths. The mayor went back to the Common Council a second time, and this time we got approved for $45,000 for a traffic education campaign. This process takes a long time, but we have started it, and we have now conducted. So the city had sent out an RFP for marketing consultants. I forget how many we got. It was something like 8 respondents. We've narrowed it down to a top 3. We are actually interviewing the top 3 tomorrow. So we're about there in the stage of the process of hiring a consultant to do this work. Unfortunately, when we reconfigured the timeline for this project, it looks like we won't have the education campaign until about April. But at least it'll be sort of in line with spring, the time when a lot of cyclists and walkers will be coming out and using the infrastructure for the first time. As much as we'd like to have it out now, it'll have to be around April. So it's both good and bad. The project is moving forward. We've got some real momentum now, and the education materials should probably start to roll out around April.
Great, good. I think April is a good time to do it. I think it's a good thing.
Claudette's waving.
Emily, is this plan going to be scalable? In other words, is this only for Broadway? Or is this going to be able to be used for other things in the city as we progress?
It's a great question, Claudette. Yeah, so we're really hoping that the marketing materials can be more universal. And in fact, we're partnering with UCTC and the county planning that some of those materials might be used elsewhere. and not just for Broadway, but there are some specific needs for Broadway. For example, the green bike boxes, we really do need to explain how to use them. I'm a cyclist and I'm not entirely sure how to use them. So yes and no. There are some specific education materials we need about Broadway, but then there's absolutely some general education materials that we would like to be able to, or a campaign even, that maybe can be used again, not just for this project, and maybe possibly even for a bigger audience like the county. So part of that is what we're trying to figure out with the consultant.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know I've heard of a number of complaints about Broadway, and I've tried to explain why it is a good thing that we did redesign Broadway, but of course people are going, I don't get it. So the sooner we can get that out, I think April will be good. But as we've discussed before, something that could be used more universally as needed would also be great. So thank you.
Yeah. And
Right.
yeah, so that's good. Thank you, Claudette.
Can I just add, so 45,000 doesn't, in some ways feels like a lot, but it's not a lot to cover it all. So we're going to do the best we can with the amount of money that they gave us. So that may cover a marketing plan and then some materials, but it's not going to cover every request that we will have for education, unfortunately. There's an infinite need.
But is the possibility of having some of the basics done when we do go to other areas, we can incorporate education into that proposal that would be able to piggyback on that? I agree, $45,000 isn't going to get us much, but if we had some of the basic logo designs or whatever, we could utilize that in other projects.
I think so. Go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
Well, we could also start to push the county, David, for the traffic safety board. The governor's traffic safety board, I believe, might be able to provide us with some resources, but that's to be determined, and we'll push on that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, David.
Brian, I think, was recently appointed to the head of the traffic safety committee for Ulster County, and that's one of the key things that we're looking at doing is getting some messaging out there. And as part of that, with the governor's traffic safety committee at the statewide level, there's opportunities there to kind of piggyback off of the materials that they already generate, and so making sure that you have a consistent message going through. And I think it's a great observation and question of, are we going to be able to use these materials, elsewhere through the county? And, I imagine that part of the scope is you're looking to keep a consistent campaign. And so if you see one, the message may change, but the visuals may look similar. So it's part of an overall safety campaign.
I think Brian mentioned something about having like $5,000 that they could throw towards this.
Yeah, we're going through budgeting right now for on the transportation council side, so it's definitely on our minds, something that we've been working towards with the city, and are trying to bring resources to bear on it for sure.
Tell Brian not to let the cops get all that money. They've had it for years. It's time for.
Yeah, I think there's a new sheriff in town, as it were.
Yes. That's a good thing. Hurley Avenue parking. I don't know if anybody has any comment. I want to skip over, but Hurley Avenue parking lane.
I sent an email to Jeff Morrell, the Alderman First Ward, about it, and I heard nothing back. And I followed up on it and still heard nothing back. So I don't know that anything was taken to the Common Council's whatever they call the committee that's reviewing traffic related issues. And I reported another thing the other day that was related, and they just basically rejected it and told me I had to talk to NISDOT. So it's on Albany Avenue.
That is Albany. They do have Albany Avenue. Greg, do you have anything to add to that or not? Or we just
John, if you can forward me what you sent to Alderman Ventura Morel, just so I can see what you wrote, and then maybe I'll kind of follow up with him
Yeah,
or have John follow up with him.
yeah, I don't remember who I CC'd on it offhand, but I'll make a note to do that.
Emily,
Jeffrey is one of the common council people that is stepping down. Barbara Hill will be the new representative
Yeah.
for Ward 1.
Right.
So you might want to start looping her in.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, this changing of the guard is going to be inconvenient, but, or convenient from their perspective. New members. I haven't seen any, I did see something, I think. I don't remember seeing anything. Greg, did I miss something? Is there a new membership possibility?
Well, no, I had sent some applications a little while back, some
Right.
people who were interested. I just wanted to keep it on the agenda,
Yeah,
just
good
so
idea.
we don't forget about it, because we are kind of light on members at this point. We could use more. And, anybody who sees this can apply through the form that you have to submit.
And if memory serves, yes, I remember that. And we invited one of the person who expressed an interest to attend the meeting, and they have not done so. So I didn't really pursue it. But Elizabeth could be a new member. She's quiet.
Bob, if we could go back to the common council for a moment, we're going to lose our liaison also.
Yeah.
Right.
O'Reilly's not,
Right, he's out.
we're
Yeah.
going to be in office again. I don't know if we've got any input on that, but maybe we can suggest somebody that would be really engaged in the, in the complete streets issues.
Yeah.
That would be good. Emily raised her hand.
I believe Barbara Hill is going to request to be on Live Well Kingston's liaison. So it might be a good partnership if Barbara's also the liaison here. I think President Shout is the one who decides who goes to what,
Oh,
but I
Simons.
think we could make the request. Yeah.
EJ, Michelle just said she stepped away when I made the crack that she should join the committee. So I'll forgive her for that. And she can still consider that. How's that?
She didn't phrase it correct, Bob. You should have just said that she was appointed.
Right.
Okay, that's it. I am not adverse to getting involved, as Greg attests.
Oh, well, we would certainly, we are in need of committee members, and Greg can show you, you can apply online. There's a thing in the city hall, in the city website. That'd be great.
Well, I'm actually trying to get involved in Franklin Street. I don't know, Greg, if that would interfere.
Nope.
No? Okay. I'll look at it. Great, thanks.
Okay, good. So that's a good thing. Okay, I'm gonna move on to project updates. We're all done, right, Greg?
Project updates, yeah. So I guess I can go through these pretty quickly. Not a lot has changed since our last meeting. Broadway streetscape, it's just like we're limping to the end here. It's just the same thing I talked about last time with, supply chain delays, not getting the signals in. But hopefully in January, we're trying to get it done. It was supposed to, last week, we were supposed to have all the signals working, bike signals, traffic signals, everything working with the signal detection, but it just didn't come through. There was some miscommunication on what was actually available there. So we're still trying to push to get it done before the end of this year. Because once all those signals are timed together, it's going to work even better than it is now. We won't hear any complaints at that point, at least from either motorists or cyclists. I-587 is pretty much wrapped up, aside from what was mentioned earlier about the RFBs on 587 needing to be powered. The Broadway Grand intersection, similar thing. We're on temporary signals right now. We're still waiting for signal equipment that is supposed to be here in January. And that's one where we've been getting complaints about that. And it really doesn't work on temporary signals. You cannot judge that intersection based on temporary signals because there's no turn arrows. I mean, it's just the level of service at that intersection is not even close to what it's going to be once the actual signals are there. So, but I'm just preaching to the choir. Emily?
I wanted to mention, so my department has gotten a large grant creating healthy schools and communities project. That's part of why I have a new staff member. Within that grant project, we have allocated a potential project at the Broadway and Grant intersection. So we may be able to do a landscaping plan for that intersection. Just the plan, not the implementation. But so that's a part of that project that will probably happen after the construction is closed.
Great. So then pedestrian safety action plan, that's all wrapped up.
Greg, does that include the intersections like at Maiden Lane and Albany Avenue there, or Broadway? I guess that's Albany Avenue.
Yeah.
I thought there was supposed to be one on Crown and North Front, and I didn't notice anything done there.
So at Crown and North Front, there's new crosswalks, and there's just new high visibility signs. There isn't an RFB there, and they didn't do any new curb ramps there, but they just put in new signs right at the North Front Street Tavern, that intersection you're talking about.
No, the Crowns, or let me think about it. I don't think there's any improvements on North Front Street. I just walked through there yesterday. I don't remember seeing anything.
Yeah, outside, right in front of the North Front Street Tavern and in front of what used to be, is an antique store now across the street. There's two high visibility signs there that were put in. And there's just a new painted crosswalk there.
They didn't do anything with the curb cuts though, did they?
No, they didn't do any curb work there. It's just for the actual crosswalk.
I thought they were doing curb cuts and stuff.
Not at that location. For whatever reason, it was not curb cuts there. We're not going to be covered by the funding source. It didn't apply for some reason. So what you see now that's the finished product for the piece. Then all the other projects that are just still in design. The Henry Street project is in detailed design. Brian's coming in. Franklin Street project, we just kind of close up our public comment period. We got a lot of feedback from residents on that street, and we're incorporating that into design. And so Henry Street and Franklin Street, the goal is to get them built in 2022. So we're trying to get those bid late winter at the latest to get some good prices for that. And that's really all I have. And aside, if there's any specific questions that I can answer, I'm more than willing to.
Oh, good job, Greg. That's the lesson of heavy highway construction. The last 5% of the job is going to make you nuts. Always is. Any questions, comments on that stuff? And Brian is just in time for new business to talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or he can make David do it and pretend like he's not there. Whatever you want to do.
David, take it away.
Yeah, I don't feel like Brian's allowed to just come in like that and steal David's thunder.
Yeah, I have been out of the office for the past couple of days, and I have not really had a chance to review those slides. I didn't want to just go over them with everyone. I don't know, Dave, if you had a chance to review them at all.
I got them this morning, Brian.
Yeah, well, you've had more time to review them than I have. But my thought was we could just run through them quickly. There's the one main slide deck, David, and just have an open conversation and some comment. I'll give you my general thoughts and overview about the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is now law, thankfully, is a very significant investment in our country's infrastructure and badly needed, and has been badly needed for some time. We've been in a situation where it's been kick the can down the road with public infrastructure for quite a while now. And we're just beginning to get a sense of what is in the bill. And I can give you a broad overview right now, and maybe we can jump to just a couple slides and give a few highlights with greater detail. Essentially, it is a continuation of the existing Federal Surface Transportation Authorization Act, that component of the IIJA. IIJA includes a broad swath of infrastructure dollars. Transportation, I believe, is about 50% of the total bill. I don't know why my video keeps dimming on us. I'm sorry about that.
Brian, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are there slides that we should be referencing while you're talking?
In just a moment, I don't have them up. I think Dave, if you
You
can
want me
allow
to share?
David to share his, go ahead, Dave. So as I was saying, transportation is about 50% of the total bill, and the existing FAST Act programs were carried through into the new bill. So those programs will continue to exist with an increase of 40% across the board for each program in transit and in Federal Highway Administration. Plus, some of the changes that have been done include changing the types of projects that can be applied for under traditional programs. One traditional program, many of you probably aren't terribly familiar with all the myriad programs in the bill. One very common program is the Surface Transportation Block Grant program, which funds quite a bit of bridge or quite a bit of road paving projects across the United States and in New York State. So one of the changes in the STBG program is that they're going to allow resiliency projects to be included as a component of project proposals. So that gives states and DOT regions and MPOs a lot more flexibility in identifying the types of projects that can be applied for. The Transportation Alternatives Program will continue with a significant increase in funding available to it. So the way all these programs work, with some exceptions or variations, is that New York State gets an allocation from the federal government. And then the New York State DOT, working obviously with the governor's office, determines how that allocation is distributed throughout the state based on the program rules. So essentially, the MPO in some instances may get what we refer to as a local target. So for lack of a better word, it is an allocation. Our target in Ulster County for the 5-year transportation improvement program is very small. It's only roughly between $5 and $7 million. So that target has remained flat the past 3 TIP update cycles. So we would hope to see a small bump in that target, but that's just for road and bridge projects. There could also be potential projects that other municipalities could apply for when we do an update to our TIP. The TIP is updated by the MPO every 3 years. We're looking at doing an update this spring. So we could very well be looking at a situation where we're going to be doing a call for new transportation projects to be added to the local TIP, which is a very exciting prospect. It's something that Dave and I have never actually been able to do since working at the MPO. We've only been able to remove projects from our TIP because the targets have been smaller than the number of projects on it. So we'll wait to see. We're eagerly awaiting word from New York State DOT regarding how that TIP update process will take place and what sort of financial targets we'll be working with. And again, we would expect to receive that information in February. So as I mentioned, TAP is going to be continued. That is another allocation to the state. Then the state determines how much the regions get based on what I call a black box formula. I don't really know how they calculate the shares between the regions, but I'm sure it takes into account vehicle road miles, vehicle miles traveled, population, crashes, and crash severity, things of that nature to calculate it. Our region has been very successful in capturing those TAP dollars. So that will be a project moving forward. So that's my general overview why don't we run through these slides, because there's a few brand new programs that are in the IIJA. We don't know much about them. The rules and regulations behind these programs have not even been written at this point in time. So there's still much that needs to take place regarding iron out the details of the rules. Dave, can you run through these relatively quickly? Yeah, just keep going until we get to the new programs. So we'll share these slides. These slides were shared with me by Tom Polk. And again, I thought they were very relevant because they are specifically geared toward the bicycle and pedestrian community. Again, and it gives an overview of the process. There's formula programs and allocations. Yeah, keep going. There's a few in particular that I want to get into.
I think there were some interesting changes that they were doing with the safety assessments for vulnerable road users as being a requirement. I think the ability to leverage HSIP funds, which is Highway Safety Improvement Funds, as a match for TAP funds. So there's a chance that you could get away with doing a TAP program without any local match, which would be great, because a lot of the TAP projects that we do see do have safety benefits. And if you can leverage those together, it's a really great for local communities. Let's see here. Yeah, safety push, if you hit over 15%, I think, for some of the, yeah, they have some percentages set in there that will stipulate how much funding you have to use towards bike pads, requirements of doing a call for bike pad funds before the state can shift the allocation around, which is a good thing. So it forces, you know, dollars into local programs, which is really good.
Yeah, everyone wanted to see quite a bit in terms of improvements to this bill included in the bill. And I don't think anybody got everything they wanted, but the final bill definitely expanded an emphasis on safety of our roads because of the increase in crashes and fatalities that occurred during the pandemic. And there are some brand new programs that focus very specifically on bike ped issues beyond TAP.
And then you
go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say, you get programs like, you know, the neighborhood that are focused on neighborhood equity and access, you know, reconnecting communities. So, you know, some of the traditional urban planning, you know, getting these massive highways kind of going through and dividing up communities. There's funding in there to kind of go through and try to rectify some of those impacts that have happened over time.
Right. Community climate incentive programs. So some main core areas that are being emphasized include transportation resiliency and climate change, and system safety and bike ped improvements and equity and justice, environmental justice issues. And for the first time, MPOs are going to be required to include a housing component in its planning process, which is news to us. We look forward to learning again what those rules and requirements might be for MPOs and how we should be coordinating with housing agencies in the development of our main programs. Equity and traffic safety and enforcement. So I think we've received a number of slide decks from various agencies. There was one, bicycle community, e-bike tax rebate. Micro mobility, rail banking. I think there's an emphasis on rail safety as well that we hope to be able to capture. So that, unfortunately, this slide deck didn't highlight the several new programs. Oh, here we go. Discretion, Safe Streets and Roads for All. Okay, that is a new program. $6 billion nationwide 40% for safety action plans, and 60% for implementation of projects. Again, that's an emphasis on complete streets. So a brand new standalone will probably be a competitive program for specifically for complete streets projects. And it's impossible to say when we would see these programs rolling into actual announcements from NISDOT for a grant proposal. But I would expect anywhere between 1 to 2 to 3 years, we would probably see these programs being rolled out. Maybe as soon as the summer, but no sooner. I wouldn't expect any sooner than this summer.
I think it's codifying a lot of the kind of stuff that's been happening and really putting some specific language in there towards complete streets, which is great to see.
Right. So again, complete streets, resiliency, and social justice issues are definitely three emphasis areas that, while they've been emphasis areas in code for a number of years now, going back to the MAP 21 Authorization Act, we're now actually seeing some real money, some real dollars behind these emphasis areas. Any other 30,000 foot issues, Dave, that you can think of? I'm sorry, I just sort of parachuted in here, so I didn't have time to think too much in advance.
No, I'm just really excited about the emphasis on safety and the tools that they're putting forth in that component, and really making it more of a focus as part of other projects that are being done, which is, I think, a really great way to do it. So I'm excited for that. And there's additional funding for planning, and it does force a harder look at certain safety components that weren't necessarily required previously, and around bike paths as well. So it's a good move in the right direction.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody have any questions? I have one observation. I'm pleased that it's moving away from highway capacity as its emphasis and focusing on things like, alternatives and safety, instead of, and in fact, undoing capacity, if you will, with the community reconnections.
Right.
Interesting concept. I mean, from a concept perspective, that's very interesting. There's not enough money there to do much, but it's an interesting statement.
Yeah, and Rochester's captured those dollars for their circumferential highway to fill it. Yeah. Albany is seeking them. Buffalo has captured some, but I'm not sure they've been able to implement any projects yet, and Syracuse will be seeking some in the future. So those are the big four in the state. And I think there's the city put forth a build grant proposal several years ago, I think in 2019. And while it wasn't awarded, it ranked very well. We got a debrief, Kristen Wilson and I did. So I think there's an opportunity, certainly for the city, for some of those, what was traditionally the Tiger program, those large minimum of $5 million project proposals. There could be some opportunity for Kingston. You can never say never for a project like that. We did get a presentation from Ron Epstein, who is the CFO of New York State DOT. He's very much a heavy hitter, a master of numbers, and really interesting. I know Bob is probably interacted before. It's really fascinating to hear Ron speak. One takeaway that I got from him was, the quote was, "This is no panacea for New York State. We're all hoping and waiting for this big life-changing bill to get passed." And of course, it is the biggest bill passed in generations, but looks like we're dealing with quite a bit of deferred maintenance in New York State that has been deferred for some time. So while we really were kind of hoping there'd just be this big windfall to the local MPOs, based on that comment from Ron, I wouldn't expect any earth-shattering blank checks being written to the regions or the MPOs in the next several years.
You got to remember, Ron is one of the least optimistic people that I know. But he's a good guy. Claudette, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned, Brian, that this particular bill also had a nexus with housing and transportation. And I think that's actually very good, because there have been many housing projects or developments that are built that have no connection to any kind of local transit. It's difficult for the residents to get there. It's difficult for them to get to work. And I think that this might be the beginning of trying to blend in or change a problem that is very much inherent in this economy. It's nice to have new building projects, but if there's no transportation to get anywhere, it doesn't do you much. It doesn't do anybody a lot of good. I think just for the new project down on Flatbush Avenue, transportation from there to other places isn't great. The bus doesn't stop there. There's no sidewalk. So this could be an interesting focal point.
I agree completely, Claudette. I mean, some MPOs coordinate better than others. And, we certainly consider housing in our projects, in our planning products, excuse me. And I think if our director were here, he would say that, the Ulster County Planning Board has been trying to make that connection for some time now, and it isn't always easy with municipalities. The county planning board can only make recommendations regarding major developments, but it is a step in the right direction, without a doubt.
No, and I definitely agree that there are planning boards in areas that try to do it better, but it's on a federal, national level now that must be adhered to. I think it's just going to help overall. I mean, I know in the cities that I've worked in, yes, we definitely tried to make sure that we did the best that we could, but now that it would become a federal requirement, it'll make it a little easier, I think, for some people to adhere to, you got to do it,
Right.
That's good. Because we all know at the end of the day, transportation is the heart of everything, right?
And transportation land use connection. It's
right. It's everything. Right.
Yeah.
Spoken from a true public works geek. What can I say?
One thing I just wanted to clarify again, and I hope I didn't muddy the waters too much. I threw a lot out there. The MPO is required to update its transportation improvement program every 2 to 3 years. So we're coming up on that update cycle, and it just so happens that this bill landed in our laps just prior to it. And I think, usually we would have our guidance from the New York State DOT on how to move forward with that update at this point in time, but we don't. We're still waiting. It's going to be the longest wait we've ever had. So we're going to be working very quickly once we get that guidance to update the tip. We'll be asking, the MPO will be asking all of our voting members to give us a volunteer to sit on the tip update committee. And especially if a municipality is a sponsor of a local federal aid transportation project, we would strongly urge them to put forth a volunteer, because, to a certain extent, when we update the tip, it gives us a blank slate regarding all the projects that are currently on it. There's some limitations. If it's TAP funds, we can't add more money typically. But if other projects, there may be some flexibility, especially with scheduling. So Greg, we haven't made that official request yet. We did put notice out to members. You were at that meeting. So we'll be forming that committee. You would be a great person to sit on that, since you are heavily involved in all those projects. And we'll be doing that tip update process. Then at the same time, we'll be updating our tip project selection criteria, which is a long list of grading criteria that we will use at the Transportation Council to rate and rank new projects to be added to the tip. So we do anticipate doing a call for new projects. We just don't know when. We will probably do the tip update and address all the existing projects that are currently on the tip. And then next year, right around maybe this time next year, or fall next year, we'll look at doing a call for projects if we have the additional funds in order to do that call.
It's, it's not that scary to have a call for new I've done that in the olden days. We used to do that regularly.
Yeah, exactly.
We had money. And my guess is historically, if they're looking at new programs, the guidance that comes out of the FHWA and the feds is going to take more than a year.
Right.
It takes a long time for them to get their act together.
Right.
And AASHTO is going to have to get involved. It's going to be a while. So, but it's good that it's happening. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your insight. And we'll
Well,
continue
thank
to
you,
look.
Dave.
Greg's got some.
I believe Helen had her hand up at one
Oh,
point.
Helen,
Did you have
I'm
a
sorry.
question?
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you're
not
breaking
sure
up.
if this is quite the right place to ask it, but I'm curious with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is there any money available or any plan to look for money to bury cables in the urban areas? Is that something that you guys have discussed at all?
That's a great topic. It is something that I've discussed in my role here at the Transportation Council and in my previous position. The short answer is no. Typically, to relocate overhead infrastructure is considered a betterment by the utility companies, and they're happy to do it for you as long as you pay for it. And you cannot use federal transportation dollars toward that process, which I think would be an enormous benefit for municipalities from an aesthetic and from a resiliency perspective, but it's something that's difficult to accomplish. Bob, I imagine you've dealt with this.
We've dealt with this a lot. There's lots of hurdles. The power company will do it if you'll pay. The transportation community historically has had a long debate about whether transmission wires and pipelines are transportation. And there's a school of thought that they are, because they're transporting materials, or, that is not, it's not embraced nationwide. There's lots of people who don't believe that pipelines or power lines should be part of transportation. Yeah, undergrounding utilities is always not part of the transportation budget. Never has been part of the transportation budget, in my experience.
I wanted to dig into this a bit. Sorry. By the way, I've got a terrible internet connection, which is why I keep coming in and out. I beg your pardon. So if I wanted to dig into this a bit, do you have any materials that you've explored before that you could share with me or point me in the right direction?
I could kick around. I did a sort of a research project on this. That was 20 years ago. And I gave you the really short version of the conclusions just a moment ago. But I can kick around and see if there's been any progress made, particularly relevant to New York State communities.
Okay, we can speak offline then.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to, I would say, having lived in California, we did underground a lot of our utilities where we could. When I came back east, I was surprised that it wasn't being done as much here, but I do understand why. It is something in some communities that is very important, and they want it for view and sight lines, also for safety. Because there are a lot of issues with power lines, especially in lands that burn a lot. So it depends on, where you are. It's a difficult subject, I would say.
Yep. New York State DOT, and you can look on their website, has a whole series on utilities in the right of way and the rules that relate to them. And there may be some information in there that would be useful, because they do discuss undergrounding or not undergrounding, and the rights of utilities to be in the right of way and the highway right of way, and the obligations of the utility owners versus the owners of the highway right of way. Yeah, it is not, Brian's right, it's not controversial free. The utilities my experience is utilities are tepid about it at best, because it makes it more difficult in the Northeast for them to find breaks, and they're not as buried lines are not as efficient as overhead lines. There's a heat issue, and so you lose some of your power and transmission when it's buried. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, you know, especially now that they're going to talk about this internet nationwide improvement. There may be more conversations about, you know, wires and fiber optics and other things that, like fiber optics are always buried, is my experience, are pretty much always buried. So then you get into that whole piece, you know, how does that relate? But so thank you again, guys. That's interesting. Kingston Forward Citywide Planning and Rezoning. Emily bailed on us, right? No, she's there. Hi, Emily. I don't know if you know anything about this, or Greg knows. Who inherited this? I think somebody's got nobody yet at the city.
I don't, didn't you want it on the agenda, Bob?
Okay, here's what I know about it. They had some charrettes, which I didn't go to. They're talking about, you know, form-based zoning, which is a good idea, I think, for Kingston. And I think it's going to be, you know, these guys that are from Florida have done this before. The Northeast, I attended a seminar this morning from Patterns on Progress about this, some of this stuff. You know, the Northeast already has a lot of this form. I mean, that's what we were the old days. I mean, it wasn't, you know, weren't car centric, and our cities are old here. So a lot of the infrastructure in the cities, like in the city of Kingston, is not car centric. So it should be an easy thing or easier thing to get to form-based zoning in the city of Kingston, you know, where we have mixed use and stuff like that. But from my understanding is they're taking the information that they got from the charrettes, they're reducing it, and they'll come back with some sort of a draft as a result in the near term. So they're now have scurried off and are working hard at doing that. There is a website where you can still put an input, I'm told. So that's all I know about it. How's that?
Bob, I can add that in part of the charrette process, they talked a lot about streetscapes, and they sort of had, I can't speak to it eloquently, but they sort of had the analysis of different levels of like built environments and how they could be possibly designed. And that was really interesting. They had a kind of a transportation charrette specifically. And I think some of that I'm not exactly what that means in zoning, how that'll be prescribed, but there's definitely a streetscape element to the zoning process.
Well, these guys have talked about developing as part of this citywide rezoning, a set of street standards, which, you know, is an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. You know, many zoning ordinances have standards. Subdivision ordinances always have standards. Some zoning ordinances have standards for street design. And the fact that the city adopted the NACDO standards, it's really kind of, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with in their suggestions as far as standards are concerned.
Yeah, I attended the charrette. I don't think they should have called it charrette because it was about an hour-long meeting and 45 minutes of that was lecture. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for public input. But I was very impressed with the background and knowledge of the firm. And yes, they presented the transect that showed the various types of land use typologies and the ones that they recognize within the city of Kingston and that they'll begin to address. For those of you who don't deal with zoning very often, I think, you know, if you look at Broadway and you look at the two Rite Aids, one on Chester Street and one on Pine Grove, you know, those are two examples of where they're new infill developments and they utilize the traditional suburban type of design and ignored the form of Broadway. The buildings are set back with the parking in front, and it's a break in the traditional form. If you look at one of the buildings that was at that Rite Aid site, it was right up to the streetscape. And that has a lot of impacts, known and unknown, that are not quite obvious to users of the street. And so a form-based code can begin to rectify that situation, and they're relatively easier to interpret and to enforce. But at the end of the day, a code is only as strong as its enforcement. So it's really, you can have the best code in the world, but if it's not uniformly enforced, it's not going to get you anywhere. So there's still, I think, a learning curve for everyone in the community regarding how it's going to be rolled out, but it's a great step in the right direction, I think.
And, you're absolutely right about the Rite Aid and the Walgreens. They are a perfect disaster example of bad zoning and, bad application of zoning. I mean, it's, car centric, pedestrian unfriendly, just a terrible, The good news is that stores like that have a design life of about 10 years. So maybe they'll be gone. We can hope.
I recall that being discussed when they were trying to do the Rite Aid. And there was a lot of pushback from, the Rite Aid people about it. But in Kingston, we seem to have a history of, ignoring some of the requirements.
Yeah.
A lot of the, I'll just use some of the buildings on Quarry Street. There's 3 dental facilities there that all had either brand new construction or major reconstruction over the past 15, 20 years. And every one of them got a requirement for sidewalks waived. And there's a school here. They just threw that right away.
Yeah.
Part of the planning.
I was on the planning
approval.
board back then, John. And I was on the planning board when they gave the one and waived the sidewalk. Because every time an applicant would say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'll just walk, the planning board would just bow down. Same thing went with the motor place there on the corner of Foxhall. When he didn't want to put a sidewalk when he went up for improvement, because he parks his cars right up to the street.
Right.
Yeah.
And they just okay, we won't get the same. I went through the same thing with CBS Uptown. CBS balked and then they cave. So
Yeah.
And I wonder if
that's what
if there's
Brian
some
said
way to-
about it's only a good zoning if they follow it. If they don't follow it, then what's the
Yeah.
point?
I wonder if there's some way to build that, kind of a self-enforcing aspect of the zoning laws. Force that into place.
Right. Well, it goes to having enough people on the planning board who will do the right thing, and so I guess ultimately you could have somebody sue somebody for violating zoning, and then you gotta have somebody with money who wants to do that. So, which is rare. Well, hopefully people will see the light and happily do what they're supposed to do as far as because it does result in a better, and at the end of the day, it's a better product. But
Bob, I don't know if you saw my chat. I was chatting. I didn't know how much I could contribute in this conversation.
sure, go ahead. We're
I didn't
not that
finish
formal.
that based on the Franklin Street project and the Bluestone, which Greg knows that we're working on. But anyway, part of that, they were aware of the 2 projects, but not really a lot. So myself and the other people educated them quite a bit on the projects, and they went to the websites. And they actually had not really realized the significance of and the history of the city of Kingston of Bluestone. And that was an eye-opening for them. So that was, I think, a good contribution to their planning. And then in their tours, I wasn't able to go because I was busy that weekend. There was a chance for them to see the Bluestone actually in Midtown. And then apparently Victor went and did his own walking tour in further parts of Midtown and Uptown to see. So they did come away with a better understanding of how that could be, the preservation historically of swaths of Bluestone and incorporating that kind of idea into streetscapes. And the trees. Isn't Kingston a tree city? I know this isn't the tree commission, but
I don't know if we
they
are or
also
not.
I think weren't aware of that either. So that was also because part of the projects on both streets is to, and I won't make this a political thing, take down trees and put in new trees. So that,
Right.
they're also incorporating the tree canopy. And so anyway, my 2 cents about my observations.
I did walk with them when they did Uptown, actually.
Oh, great. Oh, good.
In the historic district. So, good. Gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, John G.
Yeah. I don't know if folks had a chance to look at that video that I sent around, but I thought it was a pretty good design on how to integrate the the bike paths and the sidewalks and the motor vehicle lanes together. And I thought it was interesting that Alta Planning was responsible for that. And we've had them in the area. It might be worth trying to grab some of those ideas with current projects that we've got in planning, Foxhall and Flatbush and some of these other areas where there's an integration problem. Try to get the pedestrian, bicycling, and automotive traffic to all work together better. And so far, what I've seen in designs on some of these have been lacking in that respect. It's almost like the bicycle infrastructure is an afterthought, getting the last 10 cents, and rather than being a priority. And it's a safety problem. I think we are all well aware of some of the safety issues in town that we need to try to correct. I don't know if anybody else had any other ideas for how we can try to have a heavier hand, maybe is a way to put it, on some of these projects to focus on the infrastructure, the hardscaping, and maybe worry about the some of the, I'll just call it the softscaping as a phase 2. Spend the money on the good, viable hardscaping and street engineering, bike lane engineering, and then come back and work on the the soft parts of it, the street furniture and the grass, trees, whatever. I think we can get a better product to spend the money up front on the stuff that's very difficult to change once it's there. A lot of these things are going to be there for 50 years. Next time they do a major rebuild, and maybe they can fix them. But to try to change something that's built, I'll just use the roundabout at the 587 and Albany Avenue. That's going to be there for probably 50 years. And I think there's some design problems there. It just blows my mind that they're able to do that in a setting and pass ADA muster. I mean, how's somebody who's infirm or blind ever going to navigate that? And if you look at how state DOT recommends people use a roundabout as a pedestrian or a cyclist, it's they're basically telling you, oh, you got to look for a gap and then jump out into the crosswalk. So do that when you're blind. So I think they've, yes, they claim they've got studies that show a decrease in the pedestrian and cyclist collisions at roundabouts. But I think it's because they've created something so dangerous, the most vulnerable people won't even use them.
You're right about that.
I think we've got to make these things a little more salient to the people that are making the money decisions. The common council, the mayor, planning, the consultants. And I think that's kind of all up to us to just engage and push these ideas hard. And that thing from I forgot, was Toronto, where that particular video was focused.
Ottawa.
They had some, Ottawa, that's right. But they had some really good ideas in there that are quite viable.
Yeah, I particularly like that video from Ottawa. One of the reasons was because, Ottawa is a cold weather city. There's no doubt about that. And they're thinking about these improvements citywide, which is not a major criticism of doing changes in the Hudson Valley, but it's, you hear it from time and time
Oh,
again.
yeah, snow removal.
I think one thing that just, I agree with your points, John, but it's one thing to try to keep things in perspective is we've seen a massive amount of improvements in a relatively short period of time in Kingston. When I moved here in 2011, there were very few, if any, of these on-road facilities. And we were planning and designing for them for several years. And of course, the federal aid process, which I'm very much a part of, moves at a glacial pace. It is painfully slow for many of us, but we have made just huge leaps in terms of a region and a community in a relatively short period of time. And of course, there's going to be gaps, and there probably have been design oversights in that planning process that we just, we didn't think that far ahead, or for whatever reason, those intersections may or may not have been addressed as adequately as we would have liked. There could have been funding shortfalls. We all know there's a variety of reasons.
That's what's troubling about the Clinton Avenue project. They're going to squeeze another lane in there for turning, and they're basically going to eliminate any real estate that a cyclist could use. So they're taking a bad situation and making it worse from a non-motorized standpoint. And I don't know if there's any way to reel that in and have it rethought and maybe delay it, because there's maybe more money available to us in the future. But I think that's just a bad thing to do now that we're going to be stuck with for 50 years. And I think some of those same criticisms could be made about the tentative plans for Schwenk Drive. I don't know that a bi-directional bike lane and a roundabout is of service to cyclists and the pedestrians over here. I hate to see it become a legacy thing that outlives us.
I think the best approach is to keep our concerns in front of them. But part of it, I know in Schwenk Drive, part of it is the the art of the compromise, which they're stuck with. I know on Schwenk Drive, if you were to go with two-way with bike lanes on both sides, you would eliminate parking, and you have a whole parking lobby, a whole parking group that's going to be all, it's tough. You have to trade off, your advocates. So I sympathize with them, but I think it's important to keep it in front of them. If you keep the issues in front of them, it'll evolve. And it has evolved over the years. Quite a bit. I look back at my early days, and bicycles and pedestrians were a nuisance.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of these streets, I've been riding a bicycle on them for 50 plus years and never really had any issues. But now we've got some design elements that are coming into play that have eliminated the space that I used to be able to use. I'll just use the piece of Broadway between Cedar and Pine Grove. If you're heading east, they've narrowed that lane down to the point where there is no room for a cyclist there. And the bike lanes also are not open. So what are you supposed to do? It's a problem.
Yeah, I go in the bike lane, even though it's closed. And take your lane out of the roundabout. I do. It's a little scary, but you get used to it. And you're not afraid. You would do that.
No, I've done it. And unfortunately, I've had people pass me on both sides of me on the roundabout.
That's a little unnerving. I have to admit,
Yeah,
that is
real unnerving. I couldn't believe they did it.
Yeah. So.
It was crazy.
So my suggestion is to, persevere in keeping it in front of them, and it will evolve over time. And, we'll see. I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where we have a hammer where we can impose it. I don't see that day coming.
If we get enough people.
Right. If you get enough, right. If you get enough people, you can influence it. So.
John, did you find a copy of that handbook for Ottawa that they were talking about in the video?
No,
Okay.
that's on my to-do list of things to go looking for. I've just been up to my eyeballs.
I'll look for it too, because I did like that video. The one thing I will say about some of those intersections is they were pretty big. They had a lot of space to work with, which,
Yeah.
Some of them were, but some of them were not that much
Yeah.
different from what we've got in Kingston.
sure, yeah. No, I think it's something we want to start incorporating, like particularly with Flatbush and Foxhall. You know, there's a major intersection in the middle of that project. But kind of getting back to what Brian says, there's plenty of reasons why we fall short at intersections. I think funding is a huge thing. It's like,
Yeah,
you barely meet the funding for the linear improvements, and then you get to the intersection, you're like, this is a whole nother project. I mean,
Well,
that's
that's
kind
why,
of what the conversations that we have internally about it. It's like,
Yeah.
this is a completely different project to just correct this intersection, you know?
and maybe the focus should be just on the intersections.
Right,
Is, the piece between them is the part where you're least likely to get, hit.
yeah,
What's the intersections where the real problems occur. But that's a whole different, philosophy of
yeah.
having a bike lane. But
I guess that brings up the question, Brian, like, is there, in the new bill, is there funding that could just be applied to intersections? It's not like a linear project.
Yeah, yes, let's assume that the MPO gets a nice hearty allocation of money that we can distribute to local municipalities. It would then be up to the municipality to propose the project. And if we had, let's say, just throwing out a ballpark figure, $10 million of STBG funds that can be used for road and pedestrian projects, the city could put forth a very competitive proposal based on our selection criteria to say, we want to address this issue because, and then boom, boom, you lay out your argument, just like a TAP proposal, essentially. It's all about the guidance for the specific program and the dollars available and who you're competing for against with those projects. I should say, I wanted to mention this during the other presentation, just as an aside. I was on the review team for the Transportation Alternative Program, the most recent round for the southern portion of Region 8, which includes Rockland, Putnam counties, and also not Orange, but Westchester. And we had 21 proposals to review. It was a huge number. And I would say 18 of those proposals were sidewalks, just straight black and white sidewalk projects. So the need is there. It's a major need for pedestrian projects. It's not just Kingston trying to fill these types of gaps.
And that's a good thing. I think, the emphasis on sidewalks over capacity, I think is an optimistic thing. Makes me optimistic. So, good. Okay, we're done. Announcements, communication, events, updates. I don't have any announcements unless others do. Nobody's written to me because nobody cares. So we have no communication unless Greg knows of some. No. Events and updates.
I miss project updates, unfortunately. I don't know if the Kingston Rail Trail was mentioned at all from Washington Ave to the town of Hurley. Was that project raised?
No, it wasn't. No.
But that project is going to the next step, so it will hopefully be bid in early 2022.
Excellent. And you guys are doing a great job with the paving, the improvements of the pathway within the city limits between Cornell and the plaza. I watch it periodically. It looks good. It looks better every time. They're not done yet, but they're working on it. And the city's replacing that bridge, which was worrisome. The timber bridge that was a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks a lot better, the bridge. They flattened it out. You don't have as high of a hump, so the sight lines are better there.
Yep.
And it's not made out of wood.
Yeah.
That's a plus.
It lasted 100 years. What do you want?
I know. It's all right. Emily, you had something to say.
An event, save the date. The Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan first public meeting will be January 18th at 6 p.m. and it'll be via Zoom. So I haven't sent out like a calendar invite yet, but you can mark your calendars if you'd like to be proactive. January 18th at 6 p.m. will be the Bike Ped Master Plan first public meeting.
Anybody else have events, updates, announcements? Well, we almost made 4:30. It was close. Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, I'll entertain.
Yeah, real quick. Just breaking news. I'm a big news fan, I guess. President Biden just ordered that federal vehicles and buildings use renewable energy with the goal of making the government carbon neutral by 2050.
2050. Okay.
Yeah, they're going to stop buying gasoline powered vehicles by 2035 and power all buildings by wind, solar, or carbon free electricity by 2050. Pretty big.
Great.
I know it's not related to this committee, but
No,
it's
no.
quite-
Ithaca's going to beat them, but yeah, it's pretty.
And UCAT will be receiving delivery of its first 3 all-electric EV buses very soon. I have to check in. They may already have arrived for all I know. So that's exciting. Those will likely be deployed in Kingston.
That's worth a ride, and they're free too till the end of the month, right?
Right. I don't know when they'll be operational because
Okay.
we still have to get the chargers installed, but
Mhm.
they'll be operational in 2022. That's without a doubt.
Brian, what's the anticipated range for those?
We did a pretty detailed study, Claudette. I can't get into the details off the top of my head. I will say that in route charging significantly bumps up the range. And we are concerned that not all county routes are feasible for EVs at this point in time, considering the rural nature of them and also the hills that they are a challenge we're in the phase 2 of the EV technology. The hills present a challenge, but the city routes, they should all be sufficient for an 8-hour to 10-hour day.
Good.
On one charge, one overnight
On
charge.
one charge. Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
But in-route charging will provide a great deal more flexibility in the types of vehicles we can purchase in the future. if we
Will the
can-
seating capacity, was that diminished for charging capacity or?
Good question. The buses I'll say this, the buses we purchased are 35-foot new flyers. And so the seating capacity is significant. And there was a conscious decision by our director, Saja Ahmed, who's gone on to greener pastures at the DA's office, to stay with large buses for social distancing benefits. We were looking at 40-footers. 40-footers just are a little, we have been running them in Kingston. They're a little too big, we think.
I was gonna say, they're a little big for this area. Back in the dark ages when I was in California, sometimes the charging capacity would take away from seats. I just was curious though. So.
No, I think the seating is about the same, although
Good. Okay.
I don't know. That's the
All
short
right.
answer is I don't know.
Okay.
I just gone for the DA. That's a curious change. God.
Yeah, she is a Columbia law grad, so we're fortunate to have her at UCAT for the duration, and we're fortunate to keep her here in Ulster County, I think.
Yeah, transit's a lot more fun than the DA though. Come on. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Claudette moved.
Second.
Second. John second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're done.
Happy holidays.
Thank you all.
Yep. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy
Thank
Thanks
you.
for hanging, everybody.
Take care.
Hi, everyone.
safe.
Thank you.